Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Safari Mack Explores North America. I'm Safari Mack, your guide and host, helping you make connections to the wild. If you are just joining me from last week, welcome back and welcome to the Peregrine Falcon Part 2. Today we will finish up our journey with one of the world's fastest animals and uncover even more secrets about how they live in the city, as well as the problems that they face, and how we can continue to give them the best protection to keep these birds around for another few generations. But if you're new to my channel, hit that like and subscribe button. Check out my Facebook page for special content. And if you have questions about peregrine falcons or animals in general, or if you have an animal that you would like me to cover in the future, send me an email, which you'll find the link to down in the description below. But if you're ready, let's go on. Let's begin with the wild things. Now, if you recall from last year when we uncovered the red fox, I told you how they, along with a few other animals, are able to make a living out of life in the city. But how is that possible with the peregrine falcons? First, we have to uncover a little bit of science. So, as we know, warm air is much more dense than cool air. Warm air is less dense than cool air. So as a result, that's what makes a hot air balloon go up. Now, if I was sitting in this hot air balloon, and if I had a fan with a block of ice blowing cold air into the balloon, well, basically, we would sink. So because of warm air currents rising faster in the city rather than in nature's settings, the peregrine falcons that are living in the city have managed to take advantage of these warm air currents by allowing them to be kind of lifted up a bit, so that they're not having to expend as much energy flying. As we need to remember, birds are kind of a high maintenance animal. They have a high metabolism that if they're not flying, or if they're not even able to give themselves enough food or water or rest and such, they can actually die from their own high metabolisms. So having to not use as much energy is actually kind of pretty cool, and it's an example of how they use intelligence at problem solving, or even taking advantage when it comes to hunting. Now, another wild thing about peregrine falcons is that these birds, you may recall from my previous part 1 episode of peregrine falcon, that the female will choose the breeding site, and she and her mate will return to that same site for many years to come. But what I didn't tell you was what the nest was made out of. That's because peregrine falcons don't really use leaves or vegetation, sticks, anything like that. They just basically lay their eggs on the nearest spot that they can find, which on a cliffside or a mountaintop. So really, for them, laying it on a building, it's not really that different from the mountainous regions. So as long as for city animals, as I would like to remind you, and if you recall from my red fox episode, as long as an animal is able to find food, shelter, and is able to raise offspring efficiently, then they can do just as well in the city, as this is really not much of an alien environment. But of course, whether they live in the country or in the city, even with their high intelligence, popularity, and fierce hunting strategies, they do face problems, just like they did back then, as they still do today. Now, of course, some threats are more different today than they were back then. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on. So, unfortunately, there are some people that actually view peregrine falcons as a pest. Especially, and I can see that like out in the country, or even in the city, because they're occupying an area maybe they don't want them there. And there are some people that have been known to try to actually steal their eggs, or even kill these birds to get rid of the problem. But that can't happen anymore. Or if they do it, they face severe penalty, as these birds are severely protected by law. And it's a really good thing, because they did suffer big time in the past. If you recall this death can, DDT insect spray from our bald eagle episode, just like the bald eagles, peregrine falcons unfortunately, were heavily affected by this spray. In fact, by the 1970s, it was estimated that all across the North American continent, there were only 200 birds left. All across the North American continent, 200 left. That's bad. So they were getting poisoned. Their eggs weren't forming properly, and as a result, they were dying before they even hatched. Now today, their problems are even greater. In the city, what I'm about to tell you, it doesn't really just affect falcons, but it affects all kinds of birds, especially migrating birds. As falcons also, there are some that in certain areas of the country, they will will migrate to different areas either for reproduction or to just get away for the winter. So birds often in the city with glass built with buildings and windows, with glass, they can't really differentiate exactly what is glass and what is the open sky. And as a result, millions of birds are killed from flying into buildings by accident. Thankfully, though, we are able to turn this around. Now, can any of you take a wild guess as to what year it was when the Peregrine Falcon was able to finally get taken off the endangered species list? I'll give you a few seconds. Did any of you happen to take a guess at the year of 1999? Because if so, you win! Yes, by 1999, thanks to protections of the government and wildlife organizations and agencies, peregrine falcons had managed to recover so quickly they were taken off the endangered species list by the turn of the century. Now, but how is that? The answer actually might surprise you more. It's hard to believe that an ancient practice of using trained predatory birds may have helped save these birds, but that's what a good number of people do believe that's what it was. See, the birds may associate the handlers with food, as they will feed the birds as a reward for bringing them back certain animals and such. But even the handlers knew that these birds did have the potential just to one day to fly off and maybe never come back. And that's okay, because, this was their way of finding their way back to the wild and learning how to fill their role as one of the top predators of the North American skies. But now there's more. Just like the bald eagle, thankfully DDT has been forever banned in the U.S., never to be used, hopefully to never be used again. And even in the cities are beginning to help birds by helping them to avoid head collisions in buildings by placing these kind of squares or dots on the glass that allows the birds to see, oh geez, that's not the sky, so they can turn quickly and avoid their deaths. So by doing all this, as well as doing other projects, you're helping to be their hero. There's another way you can help peregrine falcons today. Now, you'll find down in the description below the link to a very special website that I would like to encourage everybody to join. It's called iNaturalist. This was a fun little website that I had to use during my time in college, where you report exactly what kind of animal you saw with a picture, as well as a map that you can find online to know where you saw it. And by doing this, everyday citizens reporting where animals were located, whether they're endangered or common, you're helping scientists gather information that can help lead to more efficient conservation. Because with any kind of species, effective conservation always has to have good science to back up their proof and to convince bigger public officials like the government to take bigger action, as well as you all. You all have the power to make big changes in our world. If you think you can do that and help continue with these species and help tell people these are effective predators at keeping populations down, like maybe rodents or even pigeons at times, you're helping to be their hero and continue to see the world's fastest animal for generations to come. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's all the time I have for this week. Be sure to join me next week as we journey into the state of Vermont to head for the rivers to look for the beaver. But until next week, this is Safari Mack, and I'll see you all out there.